everybody, Jim here, welcome back to Mad Panic Gaming, where today we are taking a look at what I think are the absolute best shoot-em-ups on the mighty PC Engine. This is a console that I'd never played in my life, nor the TurboGrafx 16 up until I started collecting retro games some 15 years ago. But once I discovered it, I was immediately made aware of just how many amazing shooters are available for this classic console, both on HuCard and on CD. And though the competition is steep, the PC Engine might just have the best lineup of shooters from the 16-bit generation. So I chose what I think are the 8 best, 4 on HuCard and 4 on CD. Here we go. First up, we have one of my personal favorite PC Engine shooters, and that is 1989's Gunhed, aka Blazing Lasers, which is actually a movie tie-in game for a film also called Gunhed, which I've personally never seen, but I can't imagine that it's better than the game because this is one of the most polished and best playing shooters from this generation. And it's a collaborative effort between Compile, the developer of some all-time great shooters as well as the Puyo Puyo series, and Hudson Soft, who gave us more great games than I can count. Considering the previous works of the two developers, Gunhed fittingly feels like a cross between Super Star Soldier and one of the Alesta games. In terms of the visuals, sound design, and general feel of the gameplay, Gunhed has Hudson Soft written all over it. But in terms of the power-up system, it's exactly like Alesta. There are numerous power-ups marked with different numbers that grant different weapons, and picking up the same power-up multiple times increases its attack strength. There are some old standbys like the spread shot and homing missiles, as well as more exotic weapons like the Super Laser, which is the spitting image of the laser weapon from Super Alesta. You can also pick up super bombs, which the game is very generous with, and they're great for clearing the screen or dealing some big damage to bosses. And though you only start out with a handful of lives, you can quickly earn more by building up your score, which is crucial as there are only 4 continues. So you'll be wanting as many lives as possible to get through this one. Though I'd say in terms of difficulty, Gunhed is on the more moderate side. Not too tough, but not exactly a cakewalk either, making it perfect for players just getting into the genre that want to sharpen their skills a bit. Regardless, this game plays as smooth as butter, features some beautiful visuals for the time, and an outstanding high-energy soundtrack. And most importantly, it is a lot of fun, which is why it's one of my personal favorites. Whether you call it Gunhed or Blazing Lasers, I call it awesome. Next up, from 1990, we have the one and only Aero Blasters, aka Airbuster, which was initially developed for arcades by Cornejo, a developer that's no stranger to some top-notch shooters, and the port was handled by Hudson Soft themselves, and considering the PC Engine is essentially their console, they were best suited to make some killer ports from the arcade. And Aero Blasters certainly is. This is one of the best looking, best sounding, and best playing shooters you can get on a HuCard, and it will give you one hell of a challenge. It's not all that different from any other shooter on paper, just blast everything in sight and grab all the power-ups you can. But it's the execution that helps Aero Blasters stand out. For instance, power-ups don't just float across the screen like in most other shooters, but instead, they explode from a canister all at once, and then it's a mad scramble to scoop them up. There's a downside to this obviously, as it's easy to miss a power-up that you want or grab one that you don't. But combined with all of the bullets and projectiles flying at you and numerous obstacles you'll sometimes be expected to navigate around, this makes for a uniquely frantic gameplay experience. As the game progresses, it'll throw more and more curveballs at you, forcing you to make your way through cramped corridors at top speed, or even changing the physics altogether when you're flying in a 0G environment. Aero Blasters might just have you banging your head against a wall with just how tough and sometimes frustrating it can be. But once you get the hang of it, this game is damn fun, and even offers up some co-op gameplay for when you want somebody to suffer right along with you, because it certainly doesn't make the game any easier. Throw in some truly beautiful graphics with some especially elaborate stages and large boss sprites, plus a high-energy soundtrack for some truly white-knuckle action, and what you've got is an instant shooting classic. In short, Aero Blasters kicks ass. Next up, we have one of my personal favorite Konami shooters, and that is 1991's Salamander, which is a port of the 1986 arcade game also known as Life Force. And it's important to reiterate that this is a direct port of the arcade, which itself is quite different from its NES counterpart, which is how I first played Life Force. Whereas that version was changed to play more or less exactly like Gradius, complete with the signature power-up system, this version instead simply gives you power-ups as you destroy certain enemies, and all you have to do is touch it to activate it. Power-ups include a laser shot, ripple shot, missiles, force fields, and of course, the classic Gradius options that greatly amplify your firepower. Another fun twist on the gameplay in Salamander is, of course, that it switches from being a horizontal shooter to a vertical shooter between stages, which some people don't care for, but I appreciate the added variety it brings to the gameplay. Aside from that, this is an excellent playing game, very accurate to the arcade original, with lots of obstacles, enemies, and fun gimmicks to each stage, and some truly epic boss battles against some really grotesque creatures, reminding me a bit of the R-Type series actually. It's a ton of fun, but it can also kick your ass from pillar to post, so if you want to get good at this one, strap in for the long haul, and have a pillow handy to scream into. Infuriating, but satisfying. Also, in addition to the solid gameplay, this port features graphics and sound that are as true to the arcade as possible. Obviously, it's not going to be a perfect conversion, but the visuals here are very nice, and honestly not too far off from the original game. And the soundtrack is simply amazing, which should come as no surprise if you're at all familiar with Konami shooters, and it's debatable if the PC Engine sound chip actually makes these already awesome tunes sound even better. Taking all of that into consideration, the killer graphics and sound, plus the near-perfect gameplay, Salamander is definitely one of the best shooters you can play on a HuCard. Next up, we have a game that many players believe is not only the best shooter available on the PC Engine, but quite possibly the best of the entire 16-bit generation, and that is 1992's Soldier Blade, which was once again developed and published by Hudson Soft, and damn did they know how to make one hell of a shooter. This game was actually completed in about 6 months in order to be ready for an annual shooting caravan competition hosted by Hudson Soft. But you'd think they'd been working on it for at least twice as long, because this definitely is the best looking, sounding, and playing shooter that they've ever released. Or at least if you ask me. But considering that this is the third game to appear on the PC Engine in the Star Soldier series, with the groundwork already being laid by Super Star Soldier and Final Soldier, the basic gameplay was already there and simply needed to be refined. In Soldier Blade, you have a choice of 3 different primary weapons to pick up, each represented by a different colored power-up, not unlike what you'd see in games like Raiden or Truxton, and they can be powered up to extreme levels. Plus, you can hold up to 3 different colors at a time, and when you're ready, sacrifice one of them for a devastating super bomb attack. But fret not, because this game is very generous with power-ups, so there's always plenty more to pick up. You can acquire a cool little helper ship for some added firepower, and overall, just like Gunhed, this is a pretty forgiving shoot 'em up while not being a total pushover. Plus, it also includes a hard mode for those of us seeking a bit more of a challenge, and a caravan mode that gives you a limited window of time to max out your score. The gameplay is honestly damn near perfect, and there's nothing at all I'd change about it. And the visuals are simply stunning. I'm honestly shocked they were able to accomplish this on a mere hue card, and the soundtrack features some of the greatest chiptunes to ever come from a 16-bit console. So top to bottom, Soldier Blade has to be considered one of the best shooters on the PC Engine and of its generation. Next up, let's shift over to the PC Engine CD and another excellent port of a Konami arcade classic, and that's 1992's Gradius 2, which is obviously a conversion of the 1988 original, and once again, Konami knocked it out of the park in terms of gameplay, graphics, and sound, as this is an almost perfect port. It maintains the classic Gradius gameplay style, picking and choosing what power-ups you want to activate, but this time around giving you a choice of several different weapon loadouts, and then turning you loose in a game that is honestly not quite as challenging as its arcade counterpart, but considering how brutally difficult the original is, that's not such a bad thing. And certainly doesn't mean that this game is easy, because far from it. Gradius 2 will still give you one hell of a challenge, and even throws in an exclusive stage not featured in the arcade, which is a nice little bonus. You'll contend with all manner of enemies, obstacles, and bosses as you blast your way through what is probably the crown jewel of Konami's arcade ports on the PC Engine. The gameplay is near perfect, as are the visuals and audio. This being a Super CD game, Konami had a little bit more muscle to work with, and as such, aside from a minor downgrade in resolution, Gradius 2 looks almost identical to the arcade game and even includes a cool opening cutscene made just for the PC Engine. Not only that, but instead of creating a new remix soundtrack for the CD platform like some other games did, Konami instead gave us a perfect conversion of the original arcade soundtrack, which itself sounds amazing and once again features some of the best tunes to ever grace a shooter. After all, if the label said Konami, you knew you were in for some great music. This is honestly a flawless game in my opinion, regardless if you're talking about the arcade original or the PC Engine version, because there's really not much difference between the two. It's just an all-around solid and fun game with great visuals and sound design, and one of the best shooters available on the PC Engine. But if you're a Gradius fan, I'm sure you already knew that. Next up, we have 1992's Gate of Thunder, another game that was published by Hudson Soft but was developed by Red Company, who along with this game also developed the Far East of Eden series, the Bonk series aka PC Ginjin, and another amazing PC Engine shooter, Lords of Thunder, which I considered also adding to this list, but when I looked at the two side by side, I decided to go with Gate of Thunder as I feel it has a bit more to offer in the gameplay department. Because honestly, when it comes to the visuals and audio between the two, it's hard to choose a favorite. In terms of gameplay, Gate of Thunder is basically like an updated CD variant of Thunder Force 3, with a very similar weapon system and even having some of the same programmers as that game. You're given a few different colored weapons to choose from that include missiles, lasers, and a wave gun, each being able to be powered up multiple times, and you can swap between them at any time with the push of a button. You can also pick up a couple of satellite options that can absorb bullets and provide some extra firepower, and picking up a power-up when you're already maxed out triggers a firewall of death that annihilates enemies and clears their bullets from the screen, which is very satisfying. In terms of difficulty, Gate of Thunder is on the easier side of things, again much like Thunder Force 3. But it's damn fun and plays as smooth as silk. And on a technical level, it was a great showcase of what the hardware could do, which is why it was sold as a pack-in game with the Turbo Duo in North America. The graphics were absolutely stunning at the time, with some very dense, colorful, and detailed backgrounds, plus some very cool enemy and boss designs. Perfect for a space shooter. And the soundtrack is the stuff of legends. Absolutely awesome, hard-hitting, heavy metal tracks all throughout, which, needless to say, is great music to play to when you're destroying legions of enemy ships. So with all of that being said, and as is evidenced by the gameplay you're seeing here, Gate of Thunder is yet another all-time classic shooter on the PC Engine, and definitely one of the best the console has to offer. Next up, we have another great compile shooter, and that is Seirei Senshi Spriggan from 1991. Which, even before I played it, I was certain I was going to love it because I was thinking that a vertically scrolling shooter developed by Compile and featuring giant mechs had to play more or less like Musha, which I think we can all agree definitely wouldn't be a bad thing. Well, I was totally wrong about that, and this game plays pretty much nothing at all like Musha, but that's okay because this is still a great playing game, and it features a gimmick that is unique and adds a bit more depth to what could have otherwise been a fairly standard shooter. In Spriggan, your weapon power-ups come in the form of different colored orbs that grant different elemental powers, and collecting 3 of the same color gives you a super powered version of that weapon, as you might expect. But you can also mix and match the colors to your heart's content, as you can hold 3 at a time, and different color combinations give you entirely different weapons. So for instance, you might equip yourself with some homing fireballs, a bullet absorbing shield, or a huge wave shot that covers half the screen. And when you're tired of one weapon, or when you really need to dish out some extra punishment, you can sacrifice an orb as a super bomb. Not to worry though, as Spriggan is rather generous with power-ups, so there's plenty more where that came from. For this reason, Spriggan is another shooter on this list that isn't particularly difficult, at least not by shooter standards, making it a solid choice for beginners, but you can also increase the difficulty to give yourself at least a bit more of a challenge. Regardless though, the gameplay is great and a hell of a lot of fun, and this is certainly an impressive game in terms of its super colorful visuals that again are reminiscent of Musha, only with way more fantasy elements, and a soundtrack that will absolutely blow you away with its intense music, which is a running theme with all of these games now that I think about it. But what can I say? The devs back then knew that a good shooter requires some kick-ass tunes. Anyway, Seirei Senshi Spriggan is a great example of a top-notch shooter and one of the best available on the PC Engine. To wrap things up, I've chosen again what many fans argue is the single best shooter on the PC Engine and high in the running for best of the entire generation, and that is 1992's Nexzr, which was published by Nexzr and developed by Cornejo, the original developer of not only Aero Blasters, which you saw earlier, but also Super Star Soldier and its cutesy counterpart Star Piroger. A great little shooter in its own right. So they definitely knew what they were doing when it comes to this genre. And Nexzr is without a doubt the single best shooter that they ever developed, and is right up there with other classics like Soldier Blade, Truxton, and Musha. The real beauty of Nexzr is in its simplicity. It doesn't really give you a ton of things to worry about aside from just dodging bullets and blasting enemies. There are power-ups to collect that increase the strength of your primary weapon, and you can pick up sub-weapons that activate automatically, but that's about it. No elaborate power-up scheme, no frills, not even any super bombs, which in any other game would be a real negative for me, but here I don't mind it so much because the gameplay itself is just so super smooth and finds a perfect balance of challenging and fun. It's not a cakewalk, but won't have you tearing your hair out either. And the stage designs are perfect and throw more than a few curveballs at you, reminding me of a cross between the aforementioned Superstar Soldier and Image Fight, but always keeping the intensity and action cranked way up, and it's a blast. Great for newcomers and veterans alike. Plus, as you can plainly see, Nexzr was also meant to be a showcase of what the Super CD games could do, showing off some very impressive visuals for the time, which include some very detailed backgrounds, huge boss sprites, and some nice looking cutscenes for the day, which actually included voice work from actors that had previously voiced characters for Gundam, which is especially cool. And again, as it seems like it was just the standard at the time, the music here is absolutely awesome. Sometimes giving you some high energy, heart-pounding tracks to play to, with some others being a bit more subdued, but the soundtrack is 100% kick-ass. And so is the game as a whole. Nexzr is undoubtedly one of the best shmups on the PC Engine, and one of the best shooters of the 16-bit generation, period.